Izhar, Buendia.
Hello. Oh, check. Okay. Hi, everyone. I do look different. I do look. I'm trying a new hairstyle. We'll see. How's everyone doing today? Have you been enjoying the conference so far? Did you get to go out last night? A little bit. I'm gonna wait till Friday, but I got some drinks in yesterday. Well, I'm so happy to be here. First, I'm just super grateful and thankful to the RenderATL team for giving me the space to share with you all and this opportunity to be here. Also want to thank each of you for being here and taking the time to hear me out. So thank you for that. But yeah, before I begin, I'm curious, how many designers are in the room? Show of hands. Okay, cool. How many engineers? Okay. Product people? Okay. Other roles? Okay, cool. We have a really good mix. Awesome. I like that. Today, I'm going to be sharing a little bit about design and its value in the business world. And by the end of this talk, my hope is that if you're a designer or a creative person, that you leave with confidence and just feeling empowered, that you know why you are doing what you're doing, and you can actually provide value in your organization. If you're not a designer, I hope that at the end of this talk, you're inspired to be like, wow, I need to partner with my design folks, because by partnering with them, it's going to make my project even more successful. So hopefully that comes through at the end of my presentation. So before I go in, maybe you should know a little bit about myself, like who am I? First time we're meeting. My name is Izhar Buendia. My last name literally means good day in Spanish, so I always have to have a good day. It's kind of a curse, but maybe it's not bad. Recently I was in New York City, but I'm trying this nomadic life. So I've just been moving around. I was in South America the last 3 months. Right now I'm in Atlanta. Next week I'll be in Chicago, and then Peru. It's like I'm all over the place. So if you want to talk about that, talk to me. I'm also an entrepreneur. I love finding opportunities to help provide meaningful solutions to people, organizations. Just really gets me really excited. And then I've been doing product design for like around 10 years now. And I've been working with some amazing brands, amazing people. I just feel really lucky. And I'll share some of those places. I started off doing my own thing. Then I got to move and went to the Library of Congress in DC, the largest library in the world. Then I went to one of the largest conglomerates, General Electric, designing for like power plants, airplanes, all over like so many different things. Then did some startup world work, doing DevOps tools for engineers. If you know Kubernetes, I was doing a little bit of that. Then went to the largest restaurant app, which is OpenTable. Over like 60,000 restaurants, over 3 billion users every month in the app. And then finally, I've been at Netflix working on the studio side. You all know about Netflix. And that was so much fun. And I think the trend I've seen throughout all these organizations is that it's very complex spaces, very complex. And there is a reason why designers get invited to help provide a solution in these spaces that help provide business value. So before I go into that, though, I think the big question that I would like to make sure we all are on the same page on is, what is design? So design first, and in the big terms, is like affects all of us. I can see it all around you right now. What you're wearing, the hairstyle, the shoes, the food we ate. There's a reason why food is even presented a certain way. It's all design, right? But then when it comes to technology, it's actually a fairly new profession. And it has different names. You probably hear in some organizations, you hear interaction design. Somewhere else, you hear UX or product design. I feel like every year my title has changed, my tools has changed, the expectations have changed. So design has been evolving a lot. And actually in 2017, maybe some of you heard of this documentary that came out, where they interviewed several leaders of design in different organizations in the Bay Area, San Francisco, to try to define what is design in this tech space. So I'm going to share a little snippet of that video, because I think it does a nice summary of what that is, of what is design.
Art and design are completely different. Art is about making questions. Design is about making solutions. So in art, you can make something that doesn't make any sense, which is okay. In design, you have to make sense.
I really didn't get fascinated with design until I started to learn what it was and what it could actually do.
It's not pixels, it's not the nitty-gritty and using Photoshop or whatever tool you want. It's the act of intentionally solving problems.
I think of design as like a bridge, that like on one side you have something very complex, it could be a technology, and on the other side you have a person. Design is that thin layer that connects complexity to meaning.
The biggest challenge designers are facing right now is the fact that they're designing a lot of things that are new, that have not been done before, in organizations that are evolving and changing, for audiences that are evolving and changing.
It's a time where there's a ton of competition, and that raises the stakes for the better experience.
We will have to learn to adapt and think about creating experiences in new ways.
More and more companies are really valuing the end-to-end experience.
A lot of the really disruptive companies chose not to play by the rules of a particular industry.
Now that we realize the importance of design, now it's like, you gotta show the results.
So a really cool documentary, can you totally check it out. It was created by InVision when InVision was really big, probably still big, but I think the summary of all of that is that design is more than what sometimes you see in the eye, the aesthetics. And I really like this quote by Steve Jobs where he talks about how design is deeper. It says, some people think design means how it looks, but of course, if you dig deeper, it's really how it works. So what does that mean though? And I have a couple examples just to make sure we land this correctly before we go deeper. So everyone uses ketchup, right? Who doesn't like French fries? When you design the ketchup container, right? It's a product, it's a tool. You think of a bottle that you put ketchup in, right? But as we know, how many times have we been doing like, oh, it doesn't come out? Everyone knows that little motion. But if you think about the experience and the context of where the user is using this tool, you realize there's actually gravity involved, a certain motion involved, so you start designing the experience of the tool or the product that's designed. Well, what about in tech though? Okay, another example. I love the iOS experience. You have this experience that is seamless between applications or tools, right? Just yesterday, someone was like, oh, I'll airdrop you a link, or I'll airdrop you a contact. Seamless throughout, no matter if it's an iPad or an iPhone. That's user experience. So, like I said earlier, this field, profession, is new. Actually, in the last 60 years, it has come into fruition. And it's growing so fast, and it's going to continue growing, the statistics say. What's interesting is I'll show you when I came officially into the role with like a nice corporate job, was like here, like in the middle. And back then, I remember I was like trying to apply to a graduate program, and there were like 3 programs in the US that really focused on this. Today, like 10 years later, there are like programs everywhere, online, community colleges have it, small rural areas are starting to talk about this. So just within 10 years, how fast it has moved, and it's going to continue moving. And even not only are jobs growing, salaries are growing. If you know about levels.fyi, it's a way of being transparent with salaries. These are some of the top salaries for UX designers in New York City for an average of like 10 years of experience. Caveat, the type of company, the role, the location of where you're at, the situation impacts this. And who knows if the supply and demand is going to change the economics, and this might change in the future. But I checked in Atlanta, and for some of these top companies, these numbers are not that far. So companies are paying top dollar, even for entry-level roles. What I've heard of the numbers, still pretty good for other kind of jobs out there outside of tech. So why am I sharing this? Because I think this is an evidence of companies putting billions of dollars into this field of design. Why? why are companies spending so much money on like this type of profession? There's a lot of reasons. As designers, we like to say we come into an organization to humanize technology, but really at the end of the day, there's one reason. I love Cardi B, and if you know the song, I should be playing it, but it's money. Designers are really helping organizations push that number in different ways. And to truly understand why, you might think, oh, it's new, it's because every capitalism has gone to a new level, and it's money, money, money making, but actually, there's more to it, and I want to take you on that journey. And to do that, we have to go back in history. No, we have to go way back to Chinese Asian philosophy. So back then, there was a lot of thinking around harmony. And in 500 BC, you had different leaders, and one of them was talking about Taoism. And Taoism has to do with living in harmony with different things in your environment. Now, these different things and the environment has energy, positive forces, negative forces. But when you bring those forces together in balance, it creates something that people know as qi, right? Qi, like yin yang, is like perfect harmony. And beyond that, that impacts also how you carry yourself, how you lay out things in your space. And that's what we know today as feng shui, how you lay out objects in your environment, like an office or a room. So why am I sharing this? Because what's interesting is there's actual tools and specialists that focus on how things are laid out in relation to that type of energy and interaction. I'll give you an example. There is a tool called the Feng Shui Bagua map, and what it does, it helps you know, okay, where in what part of the home or the location of what you're looking at has what type of energy it has. And then based on that, you kind of organize the objects within that space considering the energy. I know it's very philosophical, but the idea here is that you're being intentional about how you're laying things, and this was so integral of people's lives at that time. Today, there's still feng shui, they're called masters, and they charge up to $400 an hour to come to your place and make sure the feng shui of your home, your office, maybe the whole public space is being thought within this type of like philosophy and energy. So interesting, even back then, there is intentionality about how you're laying things and its relation of those things to people that are interacting with those things. Sounds like design to me, and ensuring there's actual success and outcome in that layout. Okay, let's move on. In the time of Greece, ancient Greece, there was a lot of conversation and discussion about agronomics, or human factors. I did not know this. As I was doing my research, I learned about it. Human factors is, according to the Association of Agronomics, it's how, and I'll have to read this probably, it's the scientific discipline concerned with the understanding of interactions among humans and other elements of the system. So pretty much optimizing for human, again, optimization or harmony. Sounds like feng shui. Interesting. And so as you study more in this, in like ancient time, there's a gentleman that comes up, and you probably have heard of him, Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine. He actually spent a lot of time on this, on talking about, okay, how do we talk about or do medicine in the right way? And that's why today, in the medical field, you still use principles that he created. But if you go deeper into his writings, he actually talks about how you should design and lay out things in an operating room in relation to the person that's working in that room. Interesting, right? So if you go further into his readings and writings, there's a cool quote. There's a lot of this type of writing, but he says in one area, the point of operation must be positioned against the light, and the surgeon must stand opposite to the patient without any shade. The arrangement allows the surgeon to clearly see. To me, this sounds like a design spec that designers give to an engineer and says, hey, this is how much pixels are here, this is the padding. But here, we're talking about a surgery room. Interesting, right? So again, another example where you see design coming into a place that generally you don't think of design, but it's actually important and crucial to solve a problem and drive success. In a way, the business success here is a good and safe surgery. Okay, are you still with me? Okay, awesome. Let's continue on to the Industrial Revolution. Introduction of machines and efficiency and making things fast, right? During this time, a lot of thinking around this, bringing humans into this conversation started happening. There's actually lots of literature around this, and I'll just share 2 examples. One of them is manufacturing research, and looking at how do you design and like the architecture of a manufacturing plant or assembly line. And there was a lot of discussion and research and realization by folks during that time that introducing or bringing the humans together within the machines actually produce huge results. Actually, Toyota created a system where they were like, what if we got even more nerdy about this? And here's an example where they're like, here's where a worker stands, here's where the machine stands. If we change the work a little bit more, what will be the impact of that efficiency? And there's so much literature around this. It's just 2 examples of during this era of how design was being used and human-centric thinking was being used to help provide and drive efficiency. Very interesting. Again, an example of design during that time. And then finally, a more recent time, it's personal computing. Personal computing, at that time when computers were created, it's very, very complex, very not user-friendly. Actually, here's a UI from the 1970s, which is very similar to the terminal. And it was great, but there was a lot of pressure and push to make computers more personal. Not only from companies, but really from the masses of people being like, I want a computer. I want the power it has so I can do cool stuff on my own, manage my finances, or I don't know, do other things in my own personal home. So that push made a lot of technologists realize, wow, if we want to give these computers to people, we're going to have to really think about the human side of this, because it's very technical, and really only computer scientists and researchers know how to use this. And that was the start of thinking of tech in a more user-centered way. Actually, there was a new kind of type of thinking that started at that time called cognitive engineering. And this is a way of thinking about engineering with the idea of the person's cognitive abilities in mind. So I'll give you an example of that. The human processor model, which goes really into depth about the impact of the movement of the cursor, the movement of the mouse, and the reaction the human and the user has mentally. And how it just goes so deep, it's hard to explain. I studied a lot of this in graduate school. A little boring, but very fascinating. But what I'm trying to share here is that there was, as we know, this need and requirement to make technology user-friendly. There's a professor who studies this at the University of Pennsylvania, and where he talks about this era in the 70s, he says, the way forward for computing entailed understanding and better empowering users. So hopefully, by this point, you understand, okay, now I see why design's involved. Yes, there's a business value to it, but it's also a need and necessity to really make tech successful. So, makes sense, but what was the impact of that when it came to Wall Street? Well, there's a lot of research that shows there's huge return of investment, very big. I won't go big into the details. There's a lot of literature and blogs out there regarding that. But what I want to do is, in the last few minutes I have, is share some examples, some real-world examples of how design has been able to push those numbers out. How does that sound? Good? Okay, cool. So the first one, and I'm using examples of, there's this guy called Jared Spool. He's really known in the design industry, and he identified 4 or 5 metrics that executives, that's what they live by. It's I need these metrics to make sure we are good in these. So I'm basing my examples on those metrics. So the first one is increasing revenue. In 2021, which was recently, during pandemic, people were like, okay, no more hotel vacations. I want to go somewhere where there's nobody. So the Airbnb demand grew a lot. And at that time, the host community was like, doing well. They were like, yes, this is a great community to be part of during this time. But there's a demand supply issue, right? And there's like, Airbnb is like, okay, what do we do? So they were like, in 2021, they're like, part of their business goals, it was to make hosting mainstream. Okay, what do we do? They asked themselves, right? Well, the features that they released in 2021 were really about building trust within the experience. So here are a couple of examples. They started providing like prompts that would make you think of, like, oh, I can make money out of this, like encourage you to think of Airbnb differently, not just as a place to get a place to stay. There's anxiety around hosting. If you haven't hosted before, you have anxiety. They started saying, hey, what if we connect you to a super host or someone else who hosts? You can have a conversation with them and you can like learn from them. And then finally, they made the process to become a host super mainstream, super easy. So again, like very subtle changes, maybe a little bit of visuals, but really it's the way you kind of experience the application is what they were reimagining. And really through that experience, it's about like, oh, hosting, maybe it should be something I should think about. And what do you think the results were because of those changes? Well, end of last year, I believe, or 2022, end of 2022, their hosts grew by 16% and their revenue grew by 40%. Huge, huge. And those are changes, visual changes, interaction changes, changes of what step goes before another step. Another example, decreasing costs. So this is General Electric. I used to work there, and I got to be part of that during some of this work. And in 2010, it had to become the 14th largest software company, very quietly, like people didn't know about it. And they were doing some great stuff around software. The problem was that it was huge, 300,000 employees, huge company. They had software all over the place, and many times they were doing the same thing. So a lot of like one-offs and no consistency. So they're like, as a company, we need to improve consistency, reduce redundancy. How do we do this, right? So that's where design came in. And GE created the UX Center of Excellence, which pretty much was these broad design principles and guidelines to kind of encourage and inspire the organization to have a vision towards what should be the reason why people use our software. What should be like the experience people think of our software? Because GE was very engineering heavy, which meant functionality. They should function in this way. But what about the intention and motivation and reasons why people come here? What's the context of what our customers do and how they use our applications? So this is where they created like a playbook. There was a lot of kind of almost like talking and what do you call those design, not advisors, but advocates, right, who talk about like design. So I know a lot of organizations have tried to do this, but what do the numbers say? Well, according to GE, and this project actually increased productivity by 100% in development teams. I'm not sure how they managed that or how they counted that, but apparently it was really good. But I think the number that was really interesting to me was how much money was saved from just having a conversation and some guidelines for an organization to follow. They saved $30 million on operational costs. And that's, again, thinking holistically and contextually about how we build software. Powerful stuff. And then finally, increasing market share, the metrics around increasing market share. You guys remember in 2015, Uber became huge, one of the biggest startups in the world, and they wanted to go bigger, as Uber would. And they wanted to grow beyond these Western cities and places like the US. So they were like, how do we go to India? How do we go to Mexico? Well, that's where design came in. Designers and UX researchers, design teams were sent to India. They were sent to Mexico. And they were on the ground, taking Ubers, interviewing people. And what they found out is that out there, people use a lot of cash. There's actually not a lot of like digital, like here in the US, everything's digital. Actually, it was just in Argentina, everything is cash. For those who know Argentina. So what are they gonna do? So they started prototyping. Instead of having engineers build something and spend like several quarters building on something and then, oh no, it's wrong, they prototyped it, tested it out with drivers on the ground, and today, actually, what we have is Uber has a way to pay in cash to drivers. And actually, it's quite a seamless experience, and Uber gets the fees it needs, the driver gets the money it needs, and the rider gets to where they need to go, and it works out great. So really interesting project. Within the year of shipping that, they grew by 400 cities because of the ability to provide a workflow of cash. Today, Uber is like over 10,000 cities in 71 countries, and this ability to be quick, to jump on the ground, to like learn about what people are doing, how they do taxiing in that space, and then providing solutions within that context, I think is what has helped Uber be super successful. So those are some examples, and again, this talk is just a surface. There's so much more. I'm trying to push this type of thinking that it's not talked a lot about in design. Like, are there spreadsheets, or are there like ways to prototype financial impact of design? Like I've been learning about how people in the financial world prototype a lot with Excel. It's like, we do really well in prototyping. Could we use that to learn about how to drive business impact in our space? So a lot to talk about here. But I think at the end, what my goal is here is to make you all realize that this type of work is not just done by designers alone. It's a collaborative effort with everyone in this room. Engineers, product folks, marketing folks, designers. So just want to give you some examples of how can design help. What are the tools and thinking that designers do to help drive business outcomes? And these are 4. One of them is user insights. Designers, and for those designers that are in the room know, we're all about the user. And many times we have to move fast and we can't do the research, but it's really about asking those questions. And like my friend Brenda said earlier, what are the biases you're bringing in the room? And so we're great at that. So if you feel like you're just making assumptions, talk to your designer. They'll help you out, or UX researchers. Other one is ideation. The way we think of our work, it's all about creative. Actually, there's this amazing type of video and thinking that the best idea comes from like various ideas. So you have to really, like almost like a tree, you have to create all those ideas to find that one idea. And so designers are great at that. Reach out to them, or designers who are here, lean into that. Experimenting. We love experimenting, and there's a lot of A/B testing in design to see what shade, what variation works best. It's very data-driven, great at that. And finally, I think one that I'm realizing the power that designers have is inspiration. In a time where it's like there's so many deadlines, so much pressure, economic, we don't know what's going to happen, so uncertainty. I think we need something to look forward to, something exciting that we're like, oh my gosh, who cares about what's happening right now? Let's move forward towards that. And designers have that aspiration. They have that imagination. Lean onto design to help drive that excitement and vision. And I would say designers, lean into that. Find ways to do it in a way that makes sense and is obviously within the context and scope of your work and the organization. So I want to leave you all with one more quote, and that is that a previous CEO of IBM, which introduced design thinking into organization, said, "Good design is good business." So yes, design is about humanizing technology, bringing the user to the center and the core of the conversation, but also I think design is a business decision and really provides and drives impact for your organization. Thank you. Follow me on the socials. That's my handle. and thank you for taking the time